Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, community. Well, this is it. This is episode 3 of the trilogy, Finding Life After Stroke. The key to finding life after stroke is mindset. It's how you think. And I could end this trilogy with a more person that impresses me so much. His name is Dan Silberberg. He's CEO of ENTELECHY. He's not a stroke survivor, but he has an enlightened and awakened view on trauma in life. And I want you to meet him. I'm sorry, I'm get right into it. Dan, I'm gonna bring you online. Hold on. So let's get into this podcast.
The Stroke of Genius podcast, hosted by brain aneurysm and stroke survivor Aaron Avila, sharing the experiences of survivors and CEOs. This is your destination for inspiration.
Well, good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Aaron. Pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it. I've just had a great time talking to you.
Awesome. I enjoy talking with you as well, and look forward to what we're going to share today.
Yeah, I think what I really want, I think we only got 30 minutes together, then it's gonna go by really quick. But we were talking in the green room before the show, how some people have a stroke or have a trauma or have something and give up. They just stop living. But I want you to tell me about choice. And if you would please, kind of expand on that a little bit.
Sure. Well, we talk a lot about mindset, and you know me, I think different. So I don't actually believe in mindset. What I believe is set your mind. It's in reverse. And so we have choice in how our life goes. We may not have choice of circumstance, right? Things happen to us. We lose a parent, someone has a stroke, someone is incapacitated in war or a car crash. These are the circumstances that happen in life. And as I was saying to you, all of us, no one leaves this world unscathed, is how I put it. Yeah. But what makes the difference, and we were talking about this, what's the difference between the most high performing CEOs? What's the difference between the most high performing athletes? They all have the same skill. It's how they set their mind, how they choose to look at the world. And there's a wonderful philosopher, Epictetus, and here's what he said: circumstance does not make the man, it reveals him to himself.
Ooh.
So now,
repeat that one more time.
Right. So circumstance does not make the man. So whether we have a stroke, whether we lose a parent when we're 4 years old, whether someone is incapacitated in war, it's not the circumstance that makes the man. It reveals him to himself. Does he believe in himself? Does he know that he's a genius who's here to learn lessons this go around? Does he realize, stroke or no stroke, he or she is hugely gifted, that they're here to bring light into the world? And it may be just like you, through having a stroke and now bringing these kinds of opportunities to others, would never have happened for you were it not for the circumstance. And I'll share with you, I'm of the Jewish faith, and there's a gentleman, I have lots of heroes in the world that I've learned from. And one is a man by the name of Viktor Frankl. And he wrote a book, which I think all of your audience would love, called Man's Search for Meaning. And so for all of us, when we grow up, people ask us, well, what are you going to be when you grow up? Right? And so what is the meaning of life is the existential question. That's the wrong question. The question is, what is the meaning that you will bring to your life? Right? So the circumstance is the circumstance. There are people who go, this is going to put me down. I'm going to give up. I'm not going to be in life anymore. I'm less valuable now. And then there are other people who look at it and go, this was a blessing, because now I'm actually doing what I was meant to be doing here. So let me share a little story about Viktor
Please.
Frankl. So Viktor Frankl is one of the great psychoanalysts, psychiatry people of the 20th century. And he created a practice called logotherapy. And logotherapy is, what's the meaning you bring to life? So what's his journey? His journey, he's very successful, and he's Jewish, and he gets taken to Auschwitz, and he's at the concentration camp. And how does he arrive there? He has a manuscript of his logotherapy work that he's ready to publish. His wife, he goes there, they separate the women from the men, they take their clothes, he's naked, they shave them, they take his work, all of it's gone. They divide the group, women on the left, men on the right. The women go to another area, and now the men, they divide left and right. The people on the left, the ones with resilience, the ones that look like they can work, they go to the left and they put them to work. And the ones that look weak on the right, they put them in the ovens. And so now he's in this environment, in a circumstance where he doesn't know. His mom has been burned, his dad has been burned, his wife has been burned, and he could have given up, and he chose, right? Who am I and what am I going to be a stand for? So those circumstances are about as horrific as anything I can think of. And yet he comes out to be this most amazing man. And he eventually gets his freedom, and he goes back to work at the hospital. There's a knock at the door, and there's a gentleman there who's looking for a job. You might have guessed the gentleman has been one of the guards at Auschwitz.
No. Oh my goodness.
So he has a choice. We have a choice. And he goes, that wasn't that man's fault. And he hires him. And out of this comes this idea of liberation. And whatever our traumas are, we can choose to stay in them, or we can choose to have them actually liberate us. That's a choice. And so one of the things that Viktor Frankl said is that between stimulus and response, there's a space. And it's in that space that we get to make the choices for our lives. So we can choose to be sad. We can choose to be a victim. We can choose to be poor me. Or we can choose to go, I still have a lot to give here, and I'm going to bring meaning to my life. I still can make a contribution. I might be in a wheelchair, but I still have a mind. I might be more, under things, but I still have a family. I can still impart value to them. I can still be a stand for what it means to be resilient. Yeah. And then we look at, sort of the next thing is what I call our own world of spirituality. And this is our energy. I'm not talking now about, a religion. I'm not talking Catholicism or Protestantism or Jewish or whatever. It is our energy within ourselves that becomes our spirit. And so how do I get in touch? Go to your heart and put your both hands on your heart and just feel it pumping. That spirituality of the energy that I can bring to a spouse, a partner, my kids, my church, my community, these are all still opportunities that we have, even though we may be in some form of traumatic recovery. Right? And this may sound to some people like, well, sure, that would work for you because you don't have what I have.
Right.
Yeah, I don't, but you'd be shocked at how many traumas I've had and how I've worked through those different traumas. Yeah. So there's the mother wound out there where the mom co-ops the boy because the father's absent. There's the father wound out there for boys because dad was either irresponsible with his anger or he was emotionally unavailable. Yeah. So all of that's what I'm trying to say. I don't want to diminish people who have had any issues, but we all have them. And there are heroes out there that we can look to that actually inspire us to move forward. And this is pretty much the work that I've been doing the last 40 years in my men's work and my own personal growth and development. And so I just want to say to everyone, you have within you inspiration. You have your own inspiration, but really it's your reflection out into the world that inspires others. And why would you want to give up on that?
My goodness. You almost bringing tears in my eyes, hey? Because the insight is so accurate. And like you said, not just stroke, but any trauma in life. But I really want you to repeat that gap. There's a choice gap between the trauma and giving up or something. Could you
Yep.
repeat that again?
Yeah. So between stimulus and response, there's a space. So let's put it this way. So you're having an argument, and one person says something, and you respond right away, just out of default reactivity. Well, why would you have said that to me? And you go right into this defense. There's no space in there. But if someone is arguing with you, and you would just look at the person and go, that's interesting. Would you mind if I just took a breath? That state changes the energy field. And now instead of me having to be reactive, I can be intentional. I can say, Aaron, I understand why you were upset with me. I'd like to apologize. I could say, Aaron, I think that what you've stated actually is inaccurate. I'd like to tell you what my point of view is. So now I have choices about how I want to bring forward who I am in the world. Yeah. And silence, that space of silence, brings you to the present moment. And it's in the present moment that you have your power.
Wow.
Right. So if I'm being reactive and you've triggered me, it's not you. It's basically what happened to me when I was 4 or 5 years old, and I haven't integrated that experience to where it's not a trigger. Right. And so in our relationships, both to ourselves and to others in the world, if we could just be present and listen and just take a moment. That's interesting. That little phrase, that's you had a stroke. That's interesting.
Wow.
Aaron, I'd love to hear more about that. How is that? And now I can actually be engaging with you. I can allow you to have your story to come out. And your story is where the meaning is. I can also reflect back for you. You know, Aaron, you said this about your stroke. I think that diminishes you. I wonder if we turned it this way, if that might empower you more. And so, do we want to diminish ourselves in life, or do we want to empower ourselves? And so
Wow.
right? So
Wow. That's you. I'm so happy you're here now. Can I tell you? Because so many, I've talked a little bit in the agreement about, let's say, because we're talking this church of, in fact, Sherry Patterson out there, she's in Niagara Falls right now, and she's just totally impressed with you. And so there she is. You
hi,
want to
Sherry.
give her a shout out, Dan?
Yeah, hi, Sherry. It's lovely. Thank you for all the comments. I've seen them.
But anyway, so many times we as stroke survivors, my community, that thing happens. We have stroke. And then we forget to pause. That space between the two, the trigger, the whatever event happened, and then the response. There's a pause. Man, I'm gonna argue with my wife a lot differently. I'm gonna pause, breathe a little more, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be so active.
So, Aaron, one of the things that the way our brain is set, we tend to be more to the negative bias than the positive bias. And that's just evolution of survival, right? If we weren't paying attention, we could be eaten by the tiger, we could be excommunicated from the tribe, and ultimately we would perish, right? But there's a positive bias, and it's, where do we find joy? So I understand where all of us in our lives can find misery. Much harder, where can I find joy? If you ask a person, what would you like in a spouse or a mate? 99 out of 100 people will tell you what they don't want. They won't tell you what they want. So there is this internal inquiry. The thing that's so, I think, enlivening and energizing about trauma is that we actually get to see what serves us. We get to see what is the life we'd like to have. When things are going smoothly, we don't do a lot of introspection. We don't do a lot of reflection. We don't do, things are going well. But it's when we have these knockdowns, right? Or what I call a 2x4 to the head, that's when we wake up. And now we get to say, what is it that I'd like? So here's another quote from Frankl. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So where am I today? For your listeners, maybe take a piece of paper or a recorder or whatever works. What are my current attitudes? And what could I do to change them to be more powerful, to be more positive, to be more the outcome that I would like to have in my life?
Wow, Dan. Oh God, yeah, sure, tough. She's pumped up. You got her going. The Niagara Falls. She's pumped up. She's one that we talked a little bit about the face. She has a face, but she also has a relentless attitude. She is in that space between the stroke and the outcome, giving up. She's choosing to live again. And like I think what I really want to bring home to you, stroke survivor out there listening. Listen to what Dan is saying, and I think it's so true. You actually control the outcome of your life. You control the destiny about the choice you make. You don't have to choose. You choose to be a victim. You choose to be depressed. You choose to have no purpose. But remember, it's a choice, right, Dan? I mean, it's really a choice.
It is a choice, and it's not to minimize or say that it's not hard, right? So one of the things that I've discovered in my men's work, but I think it's true for women as well, that as we grow up, we learn shame. Shame is not something that we are biologically built to. It's a social construct that we learn. And I know from my own trauma, and I would imagine from a stroke as well, that there's an element of shame in that.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's no need to be ashamed of tears, for tears bore witness that a man had the greatest of courage, the courage to suffer. And it's in our suffering that we actually find our genius. It's where we find what our gifts are. No one gives us a manual. When we come into the world, one of my heroes, another hero of mine, is Buckminster Fuller. And he calls it that we're living on a spaceship with no operating manual. We don't get an owner's manual of how to live based on what happens to us. Yeah. But
Yeah.
courage comes out of suffering. It doesn't come out of everything being wonderful. It's courageous to get out of bed every day in a way thinking that we are diminished. But as human beings, we're not diminished. We may be physically, but as human beings that are here as spiritual beings, We're here as genius. We're here as gifted. We're here as bringing light to the world. And in our suffering is where we can actually help others to endure and to get beyond.
Yeah, that scene thing happened. Oh my God. I'm overwhelmed with what you're saying. But for me, I told you earlier, and I'll tell you that my purpose in this life was found in my pain, was found in my stroke, was found in the worst thing I feel man could go through became my purpose in life. My purpose and passion is to help stroke survivors. And I'm touching you at the same time, and spiritual touching many people within this
Mm-hmm.
network. So, what is my purpose? My purpose is to be who I am and to choose not to die, but to live.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that, another hero of mine is Abraham Maslow. And you may remember Maslow's the guy with the pyramid that we want to have safety and food, and we go all the way up the pyramid to self-actualization. Well, when he was about 67, he had a granddaughter, and he didn't live long after she was born. And I know from my own intuition that he didn't finish the pyramid. It wasn't about self-actualization. It was about self-love and self-acceptance. And so who are we? Again, if you talk to people, they'll tell you all the things they don't like about themselves. Tell me what you like about yourself.
Right.
Tell me what are you a genius at? What is it that there's only one of you this go around and no one else has what you have? What's that perspective? And, we're also talking about suffering, right? Trauma basically leads to some form of suffering. So again, Viktor Frankl, in some ways, suffering seems to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice. So as we have traumas, we have sacrifices. And you know what the sacrifice is? To grow ourselves up to be more of who we really are. That's a pretty cool deal.
It's been my journey. I'm authentic. I'm learning, but you earlier talk about the suffering is about the genuine person, and that's who I am. I'm becoming more genuine than I've ever been.
Yeah, it's interesting to look in the mirror and go, I love Dan. I love Aaron. And to actually look with your eyes. So our identities are actually formed through the reflection of others. If you were in a room all by yourself, you could not create your identity. So if you don't believe me, try to look at your eyes without a mirror. You can't see your eyes without a mirror. You can't see your face without a mirror. We can't see who we ultimately can become without a mirror. And the mirror is the reflection of others who can see that we're more than whatever the trauma is, whatever the suffering is. It's a part, but it's not who we are.
Wow, Dan, if we can get there was over 80 million stroke survivors out there in the world, right? Now, I would say 99% of them have a stroke, curl up and die.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically just surviving. They're treading water, keep their head just above water before they drown away into life with no purpose. And if we can get the message of choice and a purpose found in your pain, we're talking about changing the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, as I told you, Aaron, my wife's uncle had a pretty bad stroke, and he was in a wheelchair. He was semi-paralyzed, but his mind was fine. And I would go over to the house and I would see all the family enabling his suffering. And they would all wait on him and do all of this. And he was never happy to see them and get me another Coke and barking orders. And I would walk in and I'd just sit down next to him and I'd go, "So, how we doing today, Steve?" And he'd start on that, poor me routine. And I go, "Yeah, that's not interesting. What I'm interested in is how are you doing?" And then I'd get him to laugh a little bit. And I would work until I could get a different state change. And I think for people who may have had a stroke but have people in their lives, how important it is not to diminish, the feelings, but not to be the enabler of depression, not to be the enabler of poor me and I'm a victim and why me and all of those kinds of things. What I wanted to do was hold the space for him to see that he was still gifted, to see that he still had something to give. He was the patriarch of the family. That didn't go away because he had a physical impairment. But he didn't see that anymore. He saw himself as diminished and less than and, not significant. I never saw that. And I wouldn't go in and play to that. And I think a lot of the times people in the family were feeling so sorry for him and themselves that they couldn't elevate the game. And so I think it's important, if there are people out there in your life that aren't necessarily your family, don't be ashamed and embarrassed. Actually invite them in to be the reflection.
Wow.
It makes a big difference. And when you get that sense of energy and joy, it releases oxytocin and endorphins and dopamine, and you have a whole different chemical play.
Yeah, feel good.
And really your body wants that, right? Your body knows already that it's got its issues. It knows in the tissue that it's got issues, but it doesn't mean that it can't elevate.
Well, I gotta take the last few more down to end the show, but that's a perfect place to end it. That right there is life changing. The choke survivor, there's hope. You have a choice the day you choose. I want you to take Dan's advice, my advice. Choose today. Choose not to be a victim. Choose to see the cup as half full. This is an opportunity for you. You just don't see it. You're not looking for it, but it's there. I guarantee it. I found it. Dan found it. Many others found it. And Dan, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's such a privilege, Aaron. Thank you. And I hope this is something your audience finds useful and helpful.
More than you know. I appreciate it. But so, Dan, I hope to have you on again. I hope you're willing to come on again. I host the executive podcast on Fridays, and maybe you'll come on there and we'll talk business on Friday.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Aaron.
All right, have a great day, Dan. Thank you.
You too.